We begin in the Middle East, where Israel and the Islamist group Hamas have put an end to 11 days of deadly violence. The ceasefire mediated by Egypt came into effect early on Friday. Both Israel and Hamas stressed the results of their operations.
When we set out on these operations, I defined their main goal as landing a hard blow on terror organizations to harm their capabilities and restore calm while establishing our deterrence. And that is exactly what we did.
A senior Hamas official reportedly gave a speech to Gaza residents declaring victory over Israel and promising to rebuild destroyed homes. Recovery efforts are already underway in the Gaza Strip. Many people have lost their homes, and infrastructure was severely damaged by Israeli airstrikes.
It was really scary. Every time I heard bombing, I was worried that it was near our house.
Since hostilities ramped up sharply last Monday, at least 232 people have been killed in Gaza and 12 left dead in Israel. The Egyptian government plans to send delegations to both sides to monitor the situation. The international community welcomed the news, but fears remain over whether the ceasefire will continue to hold as truces have been breached in the past. U.S. President Joe Biden praised the latest development and promised to help reconstruct devastated areas.
I believe the Palestinians and Israelis equally deserve to live safely and securely and to enjoy equal measures of freedom, prosperity, and democracy. My administration will continue our quiet, relentless diplomacy toward that end.
In the lead up to the ceasefire, the U.S. blocked efforts by the UN Security Council to issue a joint statement calling for a de-escalation of violence on the grounds it wouldn't help behind-the-scenes diplomacy. The former U.S. Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations says the peace process was a low priority for the Biden administration, but that has changed.
I think that coming out of this crisis, there will be greater attention paid to managing the conflict. They weren't going to try to resolve it, but they kind of didn't pay enough attention to managing it. Now they're going to pay more attention to managing it.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken plans to travel to the Middle East to discuss recovery efforts with Israeli, Palestinian, and regional leaders. Turning to the coronavirus situation here in Japan, the Prime Minister has confirmed the southern prefecture of Okinawa will be added to the state of emergency. The popular tourist destination is fighting its worst surge in cases since the pandemic began.
We decided to add Okinawa to the state of emergency as the number of new coronavirus cases, mainly among young people, has surged, and the occupancy rate of hospital beds remains high.
The move comes as Okinawa's daily case tally reached 207 on Friday, another record high. The stricter measures will begin on Sunday and last until June 20th. Local officials plan to ask bars and restaurants that serve alcohol to close in the hopes of limiting outings. They'll also call on shopping malls and sport clubs to close at 8 p.m.
We're running out of available beds. All things considered, it's better to declare the state of emergency.
I'm afraid the number of new cases will increase, even under the state of emergency, unless we take stricter measures.
Tokyo, Osaka, and 7 other prefectures are already under a state of emergency. It's set to go until the end of May. Now, in another development, Japan's health minister has officially approved 2 more coronavirus vaccines by Moderna and AstraZeneca. The Moderna shot would be administered at large-scale vaccination sites due to open here in Tokyo and Osaka on Monday. But the AstraZeneca one won't be used in public inoculation programs for the time being because of the risk of rare blood clots. Health officials plan to carefully decide what age groups can be given the British-developed vaccine. Only the Pfizer vaccine is currently being used in Japan, as the law requires in-country clinical trials before approval. Japan's medical system continues to be under strain, and concerns are mounting over holding the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics that kick off in 2 months. The head of Japan's organizing committee says it's reduced the number of doctors and nurses required for the Games by 30% to about 7,000.
We have to proceed with securing a sufficient number of medical staff for the Tokyo Games in a manner that will not hinder the response of regional medical systems to the coronavirus.
Hashimoto spoke to reporters after wrapping up a 3-day meeting with the International Olympic Committee. She said Japan plans to secure up to about 230 doctors and 310 nurses per day during the Games. She said the committee estimates it secured about 80% of them through negotiations. An IOC senior official was asked whether the Games can be held this summer, even if Tokyo remains under the state of emergency.
We've just successfully seen 5 sports hold their test events during the state of emergency. All of the plans that we have in place to protect the safety and security of the athletes and the people of Japan are based around the worst possible circumstances, and so the answer is absolutely yes.
The Tokyo Organizing Committee president said in addition to athletes, 78,000 people are expected to visit Japan for the Games, including IOC members and journalists. The total number is said to be less than half of the 180,000 estimated before the Games were postponed. India is making progress to contain a second wave of infections amid the pandemic, but the virus is spreading to rural areas where the medical system is unable to cope with the surge. A majority of states have seen a decline in infections in the past 2 weeks after hitting a high of over 400,000 cases nationwide in a single day. On Friday, India reported more than 259,000 cases and 4,200 deaths. The challenge for authorities is far from over, as the virus is spreading to rural areas that escaped the first wave. The situation is turning more alarming as the medical infrastructure there is not equipped to cope with the case numbers. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has directed additional resources to the affected areas. Now, almost the entire country is under some form of lockdown or curfew. A vaccine shortage has slowed its immunization drive, although the goal is to vaccinate 300 million people by July. In other news, the European Parliament has voted to freeze the ratification of an investment deal with China until Beijing lifts sanctions imposed on some European politicians. The Parliament on Thursday overwhelmingly adopted a resolution calling for the freeze of the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment. China and the European Union had finalized the deal in December. But in March, the EU imposed sanctions on Chinese officials over their alleged role in human rights abuses in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. In response, Beijing imposed sanctions on some members of the European Parliament and others. The Parliament resolution calls China's sanctions baseless and demands that they be lifted before it considers the pact. China's mission to the EU said Beijing's countermeasures were a legitimate response to the EU's actions. Japan's foreign minister has indicated his ministry could consider cutting off official development assistance to Myanmar. The military there seized power in February and continues its violent crackdown on civilians.
The people of Myanmar, as well as the international community, hope the situation in the country improves soon. If it doesn't, Japan may have to review its current assistance.
Motegi added the ministry will deal with the matter while watching efforts made by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Earlier this year, Motegi referred to Japan as the largest provider of economic assistance to Myanmar. Japan has already decided not to provide any new aid in the form of official development assistance to Myanmar. But dozens of yen loans and grant aid programs put in place before the violence are still active. Meanwhile, Japanese journalist Kitazumi Yuki spoke to media on Friday. He was released after nearly a month of detention in Myanmar and returned to Japan last week.
I really appreciate efforts the Japanese government made to secure my release. I request the government to make efforts to help solve Myanmar's problems.
He also said he believes his arrest was meant as a warning to other foreign journalists. Next in weather, the southern United States has been contending with continuous rainfall since the beginning of this week. Our meteorologist Jonathan Oh explains that the situation will improve in our World Weather Report.
Hello. The southern areas of the United States, particularly into Texas and Louisiana, have been dealing with some serious rainfall over the past few days. The radar showing us all this wet weather impacting places down toward the border between Texas and Mexico, all the way to Louisiana, with this continuous southerly flow into the region. Here's a look at some video to give you an idea of the situation on the ground, where days of heavy rain have led to widespread flash flooding in Texas this week. That also includes Louisiana as well. Many homes and important roads were flooded and caused severe disruptions, and a number of rivers have exceeded their major flooding stages. Furthermore, nearly 100,000 people were without power on Wednesday, and we are seeing, look at that, just a lot of that land giving way because of the water that's pushing through. And the story is not expected to really end when it comes to continued moisture and rain in the area, especially for those of you from Houston points eastward. We have that southerly flow coming in from a combination of a high and a low pressure system in the area that will continue to bring that concern. Meanwhile, a developing system out of the Rockies that had brought some snow into places like Montana will be rolling through the upper Midwest, bringing a chance for some rain and thunderstorms as we go through Friday and extending into Saturday as well. I mean, up into Winnipeg as well, we're looking at some rain with a high of 16, 23 in Denver and Oklahoma City, showers into Houston with a high of 25. In Europe, a low pressure system with a cold front is swinging through the central portions of the continent, so that's going to bring a chance for some rain as we go into Saturday as well. I mean, wet weather from Stockholm through Vienna into Paris as we go into the weekend. It was very wet across Japan as we went through Friday. A low pressure system is going to be moving toward Hokkaido, and that's going to help bring some more rain to places like Sapporo as we go into Saturday. But Tokyo and Osaka getting a bit of a break with partly cloudy skies for Saturday and Sunday. That's a look at your forecast. Hope you have a wonderful weekend wherever you are.
People in Gaza mark a truce between the area's Hamas rulers and Israel, ending an 11-day war. In Myanmar, the military-appointed election commission will consider banning Aung San Suu Kyi's party for wrongdoing in last November's election. The president of the European Commission says the EU will donate 100 million injections of COVID-19 vaccine to poor countries this year. And Africans who received one AstraZeneca coronavirus injection are unsure about their next shot as the vaccine's maker in India halts exports.
There have been clashes between Israeli police and Palestinians at one of Jerusalem's most sensitive sites, the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Reports say about 20 Palestinians were injured as police used stun grenades and protesters threw rocks and petrol bombs. Despite the unrest in Jerusalem, a ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas appears to be holding. The ceasefire began early on Friday, ending 11 days of fighting. Prince William has attacked the BBC for failing to properly investigate complaints about the way journalist Martin Bashir secured an interview with his late mother, Princess Diana. An inquiry found there'd been a cover-up by bosses at the corporation. The World Health Organization says the real number of coronavirus-related deaths is likely to be much higher than the 3.4 million officially reported, more like between 6 and 8 million.